You are listening to Light Up Vichwa podcast. Today's guest is A. Helwa, the author of Secrets of Divine Love. Please let me know what you think of our conversation today and next week. And drop a line or two on lightupvichwa.com. That's my website. And you can find this podcast on most of the platforms. And because this is an audio podcast, it will be available on iTunes, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, iHeart, Radio Public, and other such platforms. And also on YouTube, although this was an audio podcast. But please don't hesitate to get this book and read it, and those who are already in the process of reading or have completed, I know that they have been waiting for this conversation, so enjoy. I understand that one doesn't have to be a parent to answer parenting questions. I'm sure you have a take on it. Do you have any insights about your parents? How did they parent you?
It's a wonderful question. One of the things that stands out to me more than anything about my experience as a child is that my parents, the way they acted with people who were serving them, had the biggest influence on me. When I mean serving them, I mean, waiters, maids, seeing how when you walked into a grocery store, that the person bagging groceries knew my mom, would smile to her, would talk to her. Being a hijabi woman, her getting this kind of attention that was so positive. At the gas station, people work at the gas station, knowing her by name because she went out of her way to say hello or how's your day, and seeing that growing up had more of an influence on me than anything they taught me with words. And as I got in circles where, I was doing counseling or going to Islamic youth camps, I would see on and on again that children were influenced by what their parents did more than anything the parent ever said. That the moment you enter a room, you're teaching. Okay. And children are watching. They don't even comment, but then like 10 years later, there's a significant moment that I think is always interesting. My parents don't even know, they don't even remember, but put such an imprint on me or my brother or my siblings, it's like this connection. And so that's one of the things that I love about the Prophet, peace be upon him, that so much of the Sunnah is his actions, is his demeanor, his mannerisms. And just like, the people who wrote down hadith, it's like children are taking hadith, from their parents in a way.
Yeah. Right. Nice. Very nice. Thank you. So I would ask then in that light, would you think that parenting is selfless or is it a selfish motive? Because it seems like your parents were not just telling you what to do, they were, acting out, which is the best way to teach.
Well, it depends, like selfless and selfish. Like there's a quote that says that selflessness is not thinking that you're less than. It's that you think of yourself less.
Okay.
I think parents have this incredible ability to do that, to think of their self less. And I think that in some of our cultures, I'm coming from a Middle Eastern background, we have this martyrdom, this especially amongst mothers, that the archetype they talk about, in Western world is the angel of the house archetype, which means she's sort of put on a pedestal where she can't really have her own desires, her own needs, her own dreams. And so that's one of the things that I've been, delighted to see in my mom transform, because she very much was the Mother Mary,
Yeah.
Even if it's in her later years, seeing her, pursue being yoga certified or certified in essential oils or these modalities make her happy.
Yeah. Doing
And
something for herself also, not
exactly.
just being that, as you said, Mother Mary, that kind of thing. And yeah, from Middle Eastern and Asian cultures, you tend to do that. Um, yeah, which is
And I
not
think our
totally bad, but yeah,
right, and I
yeah,
don't think it's bad.
yeah,
That
yeah.
just means the balance, the
Balance, yes,
homeostasis, this
agreed.
balancing act, because in the Quran, Allah says that created everything in pairs. I created everything
Exactly.
with proportion,
Yeah, yeah.
beautiful proportion. And
Hmm.
so I think this idea that, I mean, when you look at the Islamic history, you have women like Khadija and Fatima and
Exactly.
Aisha and Rabi'ah and these
Yes,
people who they didn't live a one-dimensional life. They were
exactly.
given the opening and the opportunity
Hmm.
to live lives that had many colors. And I
Hmm.
think it would be doing a disservice to putting women in only one form, no matter how wonderfully she can be a mother. She's
Yes.
only a mother,
Yeah.
and allowing her to, because I see, and actually when our mothers do that, when they do care about themselves also, then it gives their daughters and their sons a way of appreciating women in a different way. Um, and I think
Agreed.
that's been really beautiful to
I
see.
think, yeah. Excellent, excellent. This is a good point because um, I think that I agree, just not because um, being in US, we tend to think, or other people in other like Asian or Middle Eastern countries, they think, oh, women here are thinking this way. But I think this is a very Islamic concept that you should, as a mother, when it is needed to be a mother, you should be a mother. But you are just not that one person, one role, I guess, right? As you're saying. You have other abilities, and you can be a leader in your own community, in your own home, and do a lot of things and be a role model, as you said. So, for your children, that's good. Let's see. I know from your book, as a backdrop, you have been very positively writing in there, and you have a compassionate uh, way, the way you have expressed everything. So we'll come on that shortly. But I would say, have you noticed in your time, and without going into age and stage that you are at, I assume that you are a young person, and not that old. Old means like into 50s or 60s yet, but somebody who is young, and can see the patterns of parenting nowadays or during your lifetime, comparing to your parents and seeing, other parents. Do you think anything is missing nowadays in parenting that should be reclaimed, or they should be reminded of?
That's a wonderful question. I feel like there's a few things that come up in this generation. Now we have the generation of obviously social media,
Hmm.
and most of the people who are 18, 19, they were born and raised into social media,
Yep.
and so their whole lives they have this second friend that's filled with many friends, right?
Hmm.
Call their phone, and so
Yep.
now parents have to like maneuver around lots of unseen influences that they cannot be aware of.
Yep. Yep.
And so then what ends up happening is preachers, imams are struggling. And so
Hmm.
what they say is they try to vilify this notion of social media, which is a problem because what happens is everybody around you is engaging. So now it's being vilified. And obviously in those younger ages, when someone says don't, all they want to do is do,
Hmm.
right? So
Hmm.
I've noticed that with a lot of the younger kids that kind of come around and I hang out with sometimes and ask them about their experiences in religion, their relationship to their parents, and some of the social things they go through, it becomes hiding all these influences, and they don't stop doing it. Like we have this idea that okay, if our daughter wears the hijab or if our son, goes to Jama or whatever, then they're going to stop doing these things that are go against Islamic values, and they don't. They don't stop. They actually just become really good about hiding it. And so I say that all not to be like, negative about what's in front of us, but what I mean is we cannot avoid things and hope they go away.
Yes.
We have to I feel like as whether you're parents or you're an aunt or uncle or whatever you are, friend,
Mm-hmm.
a older sibling, you have to bring it up. You can't just avoid topics.
Hmm.
Hope they go away. We have this inclination to say, if we don't see it, then it's not happening. And I've just gotten too many messages of young hijabi girls that are pregnant. Like I've gotten too many messages from heartbroken, like 13-year-olds. Like I've gotten too many messages to believe that a piece of cloth or a prayer at the mosque is going to prevent you from the consistent, nonstop influence.
Hmm.
And so I say that all to say that what I've seen to really work is using your ability to reason instead of using fear, brimstone, fire, and hell.
Hmm.
It's been really important.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about, we say like topics about sex are taboo.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That can't
Yep.
be that way when it is not taboo at all starting age 12 in school.
Yes.
Because what happens is they just go into hiding. And also like bringing up these things that are very sacred, holy, amazing, and our religion has talked so extensively about
Mm-hmm.
in history in such a beautiful way. We can take from that and use the reason and intellect to talk about these ideas, to talk about reason and intellect around alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
around drugs,
Yes.
vaping issues or whatever. A lot of online relationships are happening
Mm-hmm.
between different countries, and people aren't at the age to really understand what they're doing, but give them something higher to look for instead of telling them how low they're going to fall.
Hmm.
That's what it is. It's like in marketing, they used to have this thing where they would inspire people through negative marketing, right? Like,
Yep.
if
Yep.
you don't eat your vitamins,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to die of obesity or whatever. But then they switched it up and they're like, have you ever wanted to feel youthful, young?
That's a good point. Yeah, exactly.
Make it
Yep.
positive
It is
marketing.
marketing of everything, whether it's not necessarily, yeah, I understand. Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, this is a good example. Please continue. Sorry. I
So
didn't
yeah,
mean to.
no, for sure. It's just like this idea of calling someone to something higher
Yes.
instead of telling them how low they're going to fall. I
Mm-hmm.
think is really significant, and that positive termed marketing is very valuable because if I come to you and I say, okay, um, you know, if you don't pray, you like people say things like this. They use hadiths out of order. They say, without prayer, it's the
Yep.
first thing Allah is going to ask you about. So if you don't do it, there's going to be big problems for you on the day of judgment.
Exactly.
Which like it's as if I tell you like, hey, if you don't call me,
Yeah.
I'm going to start trolling you online. Like that's
Exactly.
call me.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, actually, on those lines, maybe I should ask that question I have from a young man who has read your book. He's like, so are you done? Are you finished with your answer? So I can ask.
Please.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yes, please.
So he's asking uh, that depending on what lens one is bringing to the scripture and the scholars one follows, it is easy to perceive certain verses in the Quran or certain narrations or certain aspects of tradition as harsh, like events from Banu Qurayza and the verses regarding people of Lut alayhi salam and Noah. How do you focus on the beautiful aspects of love and compassion in Islam as you do in your book, while also holding these seemingly harsher aspects of the tradition in tandem? And he was also talking about, you, just like you said, oh, if you don't pray, you're gonna, the hell, you are going to go to hell, and very harsh approach of some scholars that he was talking about without taking their names. So please go ahead if you would.
That's a wonderful question, and I can tell the person who asked is thoughtful. They've contemplated and they sought out
Yeah.
their faith,
And there are two
it's
more
really
from
beautiful.
him. So I'll,
One,
yeah.
I'm happy. He seems wonderful, so I'm
Thank
grateful
you.
that he offered those questions. I would say the first thing is one of the deepest things I've ever learned from one of my teachers, Amani, was that the most incredible verses of the Quran are hidden in the fortress of hell and fire and harshness. kind of like you protect your gemstones by putting them in a safe that's impenetrable. But if you have the code, the most impenetrable safe opens for you. And in my experience, the code is sincerity, is humility. The code is I don't know and I don't know how, and I'm not sure. And I need you a lot to create clarity for me and to help me see the inside. And so a lot of times we approach these verses and we're like, okay, I'm going to try to figure it out. And so we project our life experiences onto the Quran.
Yep.
We project our limiting beliefs. We say, misperceptions since childhood. These beliefs we've sort of carried in a backpack on our back and projected. We say, oh, if this is it, then this is not the God I would. We just automatically go into, I know better. But these verses of the Quran are actually really significant because they force you to say, wow, that's hard for me to hear. Like, I need God's help to hear the frequency beneath what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the things there's a chapter in the book called Heaven and Hell.
Yes.
In that chapter, there's something around the notion that what is hell? Right? What is fire? And it's interesting when you see the descriptions in the Quran and you can kind of go and highlight. It's always fun to do this where you go and kind of pick out how God describes this reality. And what you notice is it's very similar to, I don't know if you're in love, been in love, etc., but loving someone, okay? And it could be anything. It could be someone, a spouse, or it could be a child, it could be parent. And imagining, right, in your height of love for them, your height of gratitude and appreciation for them, that Allah takes them and puts them on another planet and says you can't see them, talk to them, or experience them ever again. And the emotions that you will go through, like how I describe it, like butterflies with razor blade wings inside of your stomach, like this boiling despair, this inability to breathe, this anxiety in your chest. These are all, like literally in the Quran, it says that hell is like the smoke covers you, that it's like your skin is burning from the pain, like your stomach is boiling, like your throat is hurting, like these emotions that come with being distant from that which you love. So even in the verses that are like, wow, it's really hard to read, it's an expression of being far away from love. It's not absence of love, because you have to have experienced or have a deep rooting in love for you to miss it in that way, right? So similar to that parent, child is running into the street and yells loudly, screams, stop, says anything they can to get the child not to run across the street. Sometimes God has to use a loud reminder. Has to yank the hand.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So why? To prevent that next thing that was worse. And as human beings, we're stuck in time. We're stuck in the present moment. And so we have an imperfect perception of the past, and we're unable to see the future.
Yeah.
And yet with our imperfect past, partial present, and blindness to the future, we want to say how things should be. And so we have to, it's interesting because it's like constant, and that's it's such a cool thing about the Quran, is that it constantly confronts you to give up the mantle of lordship, the idea that you know better. You constantly have to surrender that.
That's a good point. Thank you for that answer. Yes, really appreciate it. All right. Okay, so second question from this young man is, when horrible things happen, like the recent rape incidents, I don't know if you heard in Pakistan, even religious people have a hard time trying to make sense of these events. So the question is, how does one think of the God, divine decree, and the ideas in your book of love and compassion in these contexts? Thinking of these things as a test for the victims and survivors may work intellectually, but can simultaneously come off as insensitive. What do you think?
Yeah, that's another wonderful. Yeah, I told you this man was. Yeah, I think it's a wonderful question, and
I'll tell you later of our conversation.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like it's a question that's I feel like mystics, theologians, philosophers have contemplated, which I feel like boils down to why do bad things happen to
To
good
good
people,
people, yes. And
right?
especially children and nowadays and otherwise, yeah, exactly.
Right. And you have, these, this children trafficking, and you
Yes,
have
yes.
natural disasters, and you have these things.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's always going to be a group of people who kind of say, oh, you're being punished for something. And there's always
Exactly.
going to be a group of people that's like,
Mm-mm.
it's easy to sit in a comfortable couch and tell a rape victim
Yep.
that there's a lesson in it for them.
Yep.
It's really easy to sit back when you haven't experienced something
Exactly.
incredibly life shattering,
Yes.
and no one has the right to do that to any human being.
Nope. Yep.
So I think we need to be clear about that. I think sometimes we're not clear, and I'll say from the very beginning, I do not know the answer
Yeah.
to this man's question,
Mm-hmm.
but I do know what the answer isn't, which it isn't. Let's put a Band-Aid on it and say, let's not talk about it. Let's say that it's, ooh, maybe it's something in your, life that you're to confront. I think that on certain spiritual levels, you can think like that. And I think it's incredibly empowering. But that's a very high station. It exists. I'll say it
Yep.
exists.
Yep.
It's a very high station. And so what I'll say, sort of for me, at least for this, is Allah made us, right? Like creations that have free will.
Yeah.
And he already had angels
Yeah.
that didn't have free will. And as a result of that lack of free will, have perfect harmony.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so sometimes we say, okay, well, why didn't Allah prevent that person from being hit with a car? He knew the car was coming. That child ran to the street. Why? So the question is, do you want Allah to stop their foot from hitting the ground? And they're like, yes, which means you want Allah to take your free will away from you.
Mm-hmm.
You say no. So if you're asking for Allah to take your free will away, then know He already created a creation like that, the angels.
Exactly.
And if you're asking for Allah to give you free will but no consequences for your choices, right? Then you're asking for a God who's not just, and there can't be free will without duality.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, there's no such thing as free will. If I say, okay, I'm going to give you free will to decide, and the options are hamburger. You can't.
That's true.
For a hot dog, you have to say salad, salmon. You have to have some choice. And so a lot of times we want, right? And then here's the thing though, we're like, okay, sure, I don't want free will. If we take away your free will, do you have consciousness? Can you, where does your thought go? What's your experience of life without duality? What is heaven without hell? What is light without darkness? What is hot without cold? Then suddenly you're like, where did your senses go?
Yep.
So this notion, so we have to see like, okay, so I have free will, but then these bad things happen, and these people use their free will in really bad ways, and Allah says that in the Quran, says, what is good comes from me, but you will oppress yourself. What is bad will come from you. And here's the thing, I think that we put so much effort, right, in understanding the inexplainable, the not prophet, I guess, but Al-Khidr and Moses. He shows us the things that happen are part of dominoes we have no idea about. Zero. And we're all like, Moses, like, what? How?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, ooh, you don't have the patience. And we're like, no, like, we need to know now. Like, this happened. And you have people, screaming to the heavens for an answer. And I've been there. Ooh, I've been there too. And I'm doing a series right now with Muslims in prison. And the stories they went through, like every Friday I do a post on the letters they send. And it's like the stories of their life that led them to prison and then led them to Islam. Most all the letters at the end of murder, rape, harassment, like they've been raped, like people they've loved been killed. Like at the end of the most horrific stories is, I am so happy that I ended up in prison for life and found Islam.
Wow. Yes.
Here's a whole story of a person's life, like, and how how they, at the end of it, where it ended, in between, sometimes it doesn't make sense. Kind of like they say an ant walking on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel is unaware of the beauty that surrounds it. Yeah. All it sees is red, green, black, yellow, red. Like that limits its understanding. And yet the thing that is far away, the thing that can see the whole picture is like, it's magnificent.
Yeah.
So I think just on that notion is to ask ourselves, do we want to experience love? Because if the answer is yes, then we're in a state where there has to be duality. There has to be that heartbreak to create the contrast necessary to experience love.
Yeah.
And Allah put us in this reality to be able to experience Him. And even through our most tragic moments, our most heartbreaking moments, like that's when we actualize Him as the healer, as the great, as the merciful. And if it wasn't for those states, we wouldn't be able to experience those qualities in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Allah knows, what He does.
Yep. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Next is I've heard some wonderful narrations regarding the heart of the believer being the seat of God. This is the last question from this young man. Through our internal and emotional life, we can experience the beauty of the divine within and without. How does one know that it is a genuine experience and not simply subjective delusion?
I'm looking forward to reading this man book one day. So, may Allah protect him sincerely and amplify him and
thank you.
His thinking and I think that's a wonderful question. Actually, it's something we've been talking about recently with a few colleagues of mine, because the notion that because a lot of times you hear people say that doesn't resonate, or I feel like this, and what I really feel is that, which is all fine. Obviously, these words are fine, but what I've noticed is we resonate to something usually that we already agree with. Right? Like we're like, oh, that resonates because it feels good.
That's a good point. It's being honest and sincere, actually. Not partly, I think, but most of the gist of it, that's what I was discussing, is if you really, really, how honest and sincere you can be with the thing, whatever you're discussing in hand, and that time. But yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. And so this kind of notion like, oh, I feel this or I feel that. So here's the thing. The Quran says, it may be that you love something and it's bad for you.
Yes.
And it may be that you hate something and it's good for you. So it might not resonate at all. Yeah. How do you know it's not good for you?
Yes.
Because you might not like it.
Yeah.
And so the first thing I think is important, because I think sometimes when you talk about Islamic spirituality, there's this inclination to incline towards hakika and no sharia. Like there's this innate inclination in general, spirituality and in-depth work where people sort of turn away from the outward because they just love the inner so much. And I understand the inner worlds it's a much more incredible universe than what we have outside.
Right. I would like to interrupt here. Could you, when you said hakika can you say it in English, explain it, because I have my viewers or listeners who are non-Muslims as well. So I just want to make sure that this is accessible for everyone.
Of course. So hakika is kind of like the truth. Sometimes they define it as the innermost truth.
Okay.
And so it has this quality of esoteric,
yes.
And then Sharia is traditionally translated to divine law, but in its core root, it means going to the watering hole, kind of like animals, in the Sahara where they crowd around the watering hole. And so this essence is like, it is the oasis in the desert of existence. That's what faith is. It's that watering hole. And so how you could see it is that Sharia, it gives form, like if you go to a pond, a river, and you want to get water and you don't have a container, you can only get as much as you can carry in your hands. It's just not much, but it is some, right? And so if we see that river as truth, the Sharia would be like the container that you can carry, how much of it you're going to take with you on your journey. it creates that form, that fortress, that protection, that container. And so when you have one and not the other, you run a problem. When you have a water bottle with no water in it, kind of just crash, right? Like, I mean, not to say it in a negative, like it's
Yes,
not
yes.
without essence. It's a body without a soul,
Hmm.
right? But a soul without a body can't really do much in this world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the Sharia is extremely important. Without the hakika, without the inner element, without the soul essence, it has no use yet. So they find their use together. And so essentially, and you see this in all spiritual traditions, really, that there is, in Buddhism, for those who are non-monotheistic, it's like they have the precepts, these ideas were essentially commandments from yourself to yourself to uphold, to be able to contain, right, this incredible, to be able to witness, contain the Tao, like in a sense, in Taoism.
Taoism, yes.
So in Islam, you have that in the form of Sharia, which is really misunderstood, I think, in a lot of ways. That's how I would kind of define it quickly. And so it's important to come with both, because what happens is when you feel something, you can always check it with the watering hole, right, with that Sharia, and say, is that which will bring me sustenance? And so you kind of are always doing checks and balances. And part of the knowing of what your heart is feeling, is it illusion, is it real, is to be more in the real. Like I'm taking a course, right, from a hostage negotiator. It's a master class. I was very interested in how he, very random, but how he kind of talks down in a hostage situation. And he was saying, when you're in this line of work long enough, word choice, you hear in the word choice where it's going, and in that person's word choice, and you can from that position yourself differently. And so you start to learn mannerisms, word choice, the way you use your voice has an effect, right? So it's so intricate, but guess what? He's in it long enough that it starts to come to life for him. Whereas I could be standing next to him, hearing the same thing, and I don't see what he sees. What I'm trying to say is, the more you spend time with Allah, the more you spend time in dhikr, the more, which is like chanting or recitation of divine names, like a mantra, the more you do that work, right, the more you're able to witness where things align and where they don't. And you're never going to be 100% correct, right? Which is great, because it creates space for humility, for you to go to Allah. And that's always a blessing. And so part of it is, you want to leave illusion, you never will fully, probably, in this absolute way, because this realm isn't the realm of absolutes. Right? That's the next life, is the life of real absolutes. Here, like in pure darkness, you can't see, and in pure light, you can't see. You need a mix of the two for sight to awaken. So that is part of it, and that creates humility. Like, Allah, like, I think what I'm doing, is in alignment, but if it's not, you guide me, and I'm willing and humble enough to shift gears, even if it's not what I want, if I feel guidance. And the best you can do is to keep feeling close to Allah, and then eventually you take steps that are more in alignment. I like, just one last thing I'd say about this is, they say that, if you're friends with a blacksmith, you will leave smelling like soot and have black all over your clothes. Right? If you're friends with somebody who makes perfume, at the very least, you'll leave smelling like roses. So even if you didn't internalize it all, it's like being in that environment affects you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. That's nice. Thank you. I just wanted to know, is there, like, how long did it take for you to reach this clarity that you have today? I know everybody's unique and everybody has their own journey, but is there a way for a young person to reach to a place where they are not totally confused and can hold on to what you held on to and reached where you are? Is there a formula? Is there a quick tip or something?